Shinies have been all the rage since their inception into Pokémon GO. It all started with the introduction of that golden Magikarp, and ever since then, Niantic slowly trickled in shiny Pokémon over time in conjunction with each of their in-game events. Now on the surface, there doesn't seem to be a problem with this, but we'll get to that later. In the mainstream games, Shinies have always added a certain level of excitement that you really couldn't find elsewhere in the game. Much like finding a white tiger or an albino gorilla in the wild, shiny Pokemon were meant to be extremely rare finds. Sure, you could grind and manipulate game mechanics in order to get a specific shiny, the Masuda Method comes to mind, but regardless, getting a shiny in any of the mainstream games has always been a monumental occasion because of their rarity. It's meant to be the mother of all trophies. So why is it so different in Pokémon GO? What's up you guys, it's me, it's Count here with another Pokémon GO video. Today I'm going to be exploring the topic of shinies in Pokémon GO. I'm going to be talking about shiny rarity, I'm going to be talking about the rate at which we get shinies in Pokémon GO, and I'm also going to be talking about player entitlement when it comes to obtaining shinies. These are really hot topic issues in the Pokémon GO community. There's going to be a lot of opinions on both sides. I would love to know your thoughts regarding everything I'm going to be talking about, so make sure you sound off in the comment section below. And if you end up enjoying this video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if it's your first time here. And without further ado, let's get right into it. I honestly think this is a very interesting topic, and it's something that we really need to discuss when it comes to Pokemon GO's longevity. So yeah, let's get right into it. I'm really torn when it comes to the rate of encountering shiny Pokemon in Pokemon GO. On one hand, I really dislike how common certain shinies are, and how predictable it is for getting one. But on the other hand, Pokemon GO wouldn't be as successful as it currently is if obtaining shinies were anything like how they are in the mainstream games. The unfortunate reality is, shinies are not rare in Pokemon GO, but that's what works for Pokemon GO. But maybe if we were to explore this topic, a happy medium could be reached. In order to truly understand this, let's take a closer look at the various shiny rates in Pokemon GO and compare them to the shiny rates in the mainstream games. In the mainstream games, the chances of you encountering a shiny Pokemon in the wild is 1 in 4,096. I mentioned earlier the Masuda Method, and this is a secret method that allows you to get shiny Pokemon at an increased rate through breeding. The rate at which you get a shiny through this method is 1 in 683. Although this does involve a ridiculous amount of egg hatching, thus it can be quite time consuming. On top of that, there is also a method called SOS battle chaining, which also increases your chances of obtaining a shiny as wild Pokemon call for help. Your chances at encountering a shiny Pokemon through this method is 1 in 1024 after 70 to 255 encounters. Now in the more recent editions of mainstream series of games, there is an item called the Shiny Charm. This greatly increases your chances of obtaining a shiny across the board. General wild encounter rates are reduced to 1 in 1,365. The Masuda Method will have a rate of 1 in 502. SOS battle chaining has a rate of 1 in 683. If you look at these rates, it is obvious that obtaining a shiny is a massive grind. Just speaking through personal experience, it would take hours of ridiculous grinding, possibly even days, in order to get even one shiny. Now let's take a look at Pokemon GO's various rates. Now all of these rates were taken from articles by the Sylph Road and Pokemon GO Hub, which I will link in the description below. What the Sylph Road found was that for wild encounters, the rate of obtaining a shiny was 1 in 450. But here is something interesting. It appears that the rate is different for each individual species and for each individual event. However, they all seem to fall within the 1 in 370 to 1 in 700 range, so we will go with the base estimate rate of 1 in 450. Pokemon GO Hub reports that for Community Day Pokemon, your chances of getting a shiny during these monthly events are about 1 in 25. And then finally for the Legendary Raid Days, your chances of getting a shiny through raids are 1 in 10. This was reported by the Sylph Road back when we had the Legendary Bird events. So here are the different rates for each platform side by side. Wow. Just wow. At this point, you're probably asking yourself why the shiny rate is so substantially higher in Pokémon GO. Well, the answer to that is actually simple. Shinies are used for marketing. Niantic, for what it's worth, have done a phenomenal job recognizing the power of FOMO, or the fear of missing out. And their design choices, whether negative or positive, have been around this one thing. Seriously, go into the game and look at every news post for the past 6 months and count up how many times they use the words hurry or limited time. This carrot on a stick approach is a phenomenal marketing tactic and has probably produced an insane amount of revenue for Niantic. So yes, this has become the reality of the game, and no one is really complaining about it. And I really don't think we should complain anyway. It's really unfortunate that shinies are what they are in a game like Pokémon GO. But the silver lining is that there are still Pokemon with a shiny form that's as rare as it's supposed to be, and the prestige that comes with having one of these shinies is not entirely lost. For example, not a whole lot of players will have a shiny Growlithe or a shiny Magby, and if you have one of these Pokemon, you are amongst a very minuscule group. Yes, even though the shiny rate is ridiculously higher compared to the mainstream games, it just seems to work for Pokemon GO. Community days are vibrant and full of activity, which I don't think would be the case if shiny rates were as low as they are in the mainstream games. We also have to take into consideration that Pokemon GO is a game that requires travel. It's very easy to have hundreds of encounters a day in the mainstream games, not so much so in Pokemon GO. In fact, I would actually argue that the real problem with these rates has nothing to do with rarity, but entitlement. Niantic recently tried something different with the Feebas limited research event. This was kind of like a pseudo community day that heavily revolved around doing research. For the most part, this event was a great idea, but the execution left players with longing. The biggest criticism for this event was actually the shiny rate. As it turns out, it was just a little too rare to encounter a shiny Feebas during this event. This exposed a really serious problem with Pokemon GO that Niantic unwillingly created for themselves, and that's player entitlement. If you look at all of the criticism, what it comes down to is that players were frustrated that the rewards that they sought did not come. Players grinded and grinded and they expected to get multiple shiny Feebas. Some would argue that the rate wasn't the problem, but it was the tasks themselves. However, I would argue and say that because shiny Pokemon are so abundant during community days and the special raid days, players assumed getting a shiny Feebas would require similar levels of effort. It was honestly a surprise to have an event like the Feebas limited research event and not have a shiny Pokemon guaranteed for the effort. I think for many players, it was extremely disappointing. This reveals a major drawback for having shiny Pokemon at such high rates. The moment you make them slightly more difficult to obtain, suddenly it is a massive source of negativity. This is kind of a big gaping hole that Niantic dug themselves in. Now, when they do special limited time events like this, they have to consider how easy it would be to get a shiny for those who participate. Otherwise, they would be on the receiving end of some major backlash. Of course, this results in shiny Pokemon losing much of their significance. Having a shiny Charmander is not going to be as special as it would be if you got it in the mainstream games, simply because a vast majority is going to have multiple. But unfortunately, reducing the rate of getting shiny Charmanders during Charmander Community Day would have caused a huge uproar. I think when you look at the big picture, Niantic is not actually in dire straits. This isn't a situation where Pokemon GO's quality and content will suffer. The shiny rate is certainly much lower than the mainstream games, but as I mentioned several times in this video, that's okay for Pokemon GO. Yes, maybe the value of shinies are not as grand, but they do add a very different kind of excitement to Pokemon GO. Community days are full of excitement, coordination, and most important of all, have a lack of disappointment. Players are enjoying themselves, and the shinies are a good enough reason to lure people in, even if they are abundant. Honestly, if Niantic didn't do anything and kept things the way they are, the game would be okay. Maybe we will never get to experience what we would finding a shiny in the mainstream games, but Pokemon GO makes up for it with something else. Rarity is not what's important with these shinies, it's the experience and fellowship that they bring instead. So anyway guys, that's going to be it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and once again, this is a discussion. I would love to know your thoughts, and make sure you share them in the comment section below. Let me know, do you think shinies should be more rare in Pokemon Go? Do you think the game is fine just the way it is? I would love to know your thoughts. Let's have a great discussion regarding shinies. And yeah, if you ended up enjoying this video, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you share this with your friends, and if it's your first time here, hit that subscribe button as well as that little bell. I am Count Jinsula, and I'll catch you all later.